Hello friends, this is Tim Collins coming to you again with our weekend word. Today I want to read you a passage from 2 Kings chapter 16. I'll begin at verse 10 and read through verse 15 about Ahaz, king of Judah, the southern two tribes of Israel, father of Hezekiah. Listen what happened during Ahaz's time. Then King Ahaz went to Damascus to meet Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria. He saw an altar in Damascus and sent to Uriah the priest a sketch of the altar with detailed plans for its construction. So Uriah the priest built an altar in accordance with all the plans that King Ahaz had sent from Damascus and finished it before King Ahaz returned. When the king came back from Damascus and saw the altar, he approached it and presented offerings on it. He offered up his burnt offering and grain offering, poured out his drink offering, and sprinkled the blood of his fellowship offerings on the altar. The bronze altar that stood before the Lord he brought from the front of the temple, from between the new altar and the temple of the Lord, and put it on the north side of the new altar. King Ahaz then gave these orders to Uriah the priest. On the large new altar, offer the morning burnt offering and the evening grain offering, and the king's burnt offering and his grain offering, and the burnt offerings of all the people of the land, and their grain offering and their drink offering. Sprinkle on the altar all the blood of the burnt offerings and sacrifices. But I will use the bronze altar for seeking guidance. There is always a temptation to replace the holy with the beautiful. The altar of the Lord that stood in front of the temple was not a pretty thing. It was about 15 feet by 15 feet by 15 feet, made of bronze, which symbolizes judgment, surrounded by spikes or horns that were used to skin the sacrifices that were brought. It was constantly covered with the blood of those sacrifices and the ashes where they had burned up on top of the altar. Of course, those ashes represent repentance, and the blood represents redemption. That altar of the Lord is a place of atonement, a two-part process. Repentance, our part, where we come and give our sin to God and renounce that sin and go a different direction. And then remittance, God's part, where He removes that sin from us as far as the east is from the west. It happens at the altar. That bronze of judgment is covered by the ashes of repentance and the blood of redemption. And every time the people went into the temple to worship God, they had to go by that altar of judgment where they repented and their redemption was symbolized. We must have the Lord's altar if we're going to have a real relationship with God. This world would like to supplant that with the beautiful things of this world, the ornate cathedrals and the finely scripted worship services, performances. We are always tempted to replace the holy with the beautiful. God's altar may not be pretty, but you need God's altar. Anytime we insist on having an altar that the world approves of, it will displace the altar of the Lord. As King Ahaz shoved the altar aside to put his beautiful new altar there, anytime we want to have the beautiful things of this world, it'll displace the things of God. We can have religion which doesn't offend the world, or we can have a relationship with God which the world may find offensive. Bear in mind, I'm not saying we should be offensive, but the world will find a relationship with God in us offensive. Jesus said so himself. In John 15:19, he said, if you belonged to the world, it would love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. That is why the world hates you. See, this world's altars may be beautiful, but the Lord's altar is the only place you're going to hear from God. Even King Ahaz realized that. The last line I read, he said, I'm going to keep that old bronze altar to seek guidance by. Now, he probably had in mind, some kind of a pagan ritual that he was going to use God's altar for. But the fact remains, to hear from God, you must go to His altar. It's not pretty, but you need His altar. Well, I hope you'll be in church somewhere Sunday, worshiping God in spirit and in truth. God bless you. We love you.